lytudiep. Hello everyone. It's so happy that Jame, Tu Diep and Nhi are happy together. But their story will not be able to continue forever. When Jame's father revoked Jame's position as director, because he did not follow his father's request to abandon Tu Diep and Nhi. It's so cruel. Now Jame has to make his choice. One is he lives happily as he is now, or return to his father and give up everything he has. So how will he be able to continue with this story? Which is the right choice? Today we will find out together. Diep is a simple, kind-hearted woman living in a quiet countryside village. Every morning, she wakes up early to harvest pears and bring them to the local market to sell. Her life is humble, grounded in the earth beneath her feet and the small joys she finds in nature. No one really knows her full story, only that she always wears a gentle smile. A smile that carries both warmth and quiet sadness. Beside her stands James, a foreign man with a calm voice and awkward Vietnamese. He's not from this world of dirt roads and wooden houses. James was once a successful CEO, living in the fast-paced world of business suits, polished offices, and carefully scheduled meetings. But now, he finds himself in a small rural home, cooking dinner and taking care of a little girl named Nhi, who isn't biologically related to either of them. That afternoon, while Diep was still at the market, James arrived at the school to pick up Nhi. He brought her home, gently opened the old wooden door, and sat her down like it was something he'd done 1,000 times. With a soft smile, he asked her about her day, then pulled out a colorful set of markers and drawing paper. These toys, so ordinary for many kids, were treasures to Nhi, simple things she never took for granted. James guided her carefully, how to color inside the lines, how to keep her back straight, and how to sit properly so she wouldn't hurt her spine. He wasn't just a caretaker, he was teaching her to grow, with patience, love, and quiet responsibility. Every moment between them felt like a small step towards something deeper. As dinner time approached, James went into the kitchen to prepare the meal. He had already slaughtered a chicken that day, a practical decision, though perhaps a bit impulsive. When Diep finally returned home, she was tired from walking between villages and selling pears at the market. In her hands were a few items she'd bought for dinner, a small fish and some beans. She noticed the food already cooking, the smell of chicken in the air. But instead of anger, she smiled gently and simply said, "It's okay." They sat down for dinner, the three of them, James, Diep, and little Nhi, around a humble table. And then came a moment that made the room fall silent. James turned to Nhi and asked, "Would you be okay calling Diep Mum?" At first, the little girl hesitated. Her eyes darted between the two adults. And then, so softly it was barely a whisper, she said, "Mom." Diep froze. Tears welled up in her eyes. She reached for Nhi's hand and apologized, for not being a perfect mother, for not being able to give her everything. She shared something she rarely told anyone, that she too had grown up without parents. But she promised to love Nhi as her own, to care for her with everything she had left to give. James sat beside them, quiet. He smiled. Yes, but his eyes told a different story. There was pride, joy, and also something distant, something unsure. This wasn't just a dinner. This was a moment where three people, all carrying their own wounds, quietly formed something resembling a family. But reality lingered in the background. James came from a different world, one of clean suits, high-rise buildings, English meetings, and future plans in foreign lands. Diep belonged to this soil, this slow life of marketplaces, wooden chopsticks, and hands stained with dirt. They couldn't be more different. Their love, if we dare to call it that, wasn't built on passion or grand gestures. It was made of shared responsibilities, long glances, and quiet understanding. James was trying, anyone could see that. He cooked, cared, and taught Nhi as if she were his own. But was that enough? Could one man's effort bridge the gap between two entirely different worlds? Could Diep, So used to doing everything on her own. Learned to trust a man who came from such a distant reality. Could love survive when it's this different? Dinner ended with laughter and full bellies. James and Nhi even had a coloring contest, waiting for Diep to judge who drew better. But beneath the joy was a question no one dared speak out loud. Will James stay, or one day, will he return to the life he left behind? Leaving Diep and Nhi with just another goodbye? They don't have the answer. Maybe no one does. But for now, in that tiny house filled with the smell of chicken broth and the soft sound of colored pencils on paper, they were a family. Real, imperfect, and fragile, but a family nonetheless. Sometimes, love isn't about grand declarations. Sometimes it's about cooking a meal, helping a child color inside the lines, and being there when no one else is. Maybe their love is too different, but maybe, just maybe, it's still enough.